Number 10. Dead Man's Island. Dead Man's Island in the United Kingdom is about as creepy as it gets. This forbidden island was once used as a burial ground for a prison colony and has recently been giving up some of its lost goods. Historians have been finding jaws full of teeth, broken skulls, and other chunks of human bones all throughout the island. What's even grislier is that some of the bones are so old that they've been swarmed by barnacles. It's actually pretty gross to look at, so don't go searching for the footage unless you're ready to see a real bone graveyard. At least 200 human remains were found in 2016 alone. Most of them belong to the men and boys who perished on board floating prisons that were moored in the area over 200 years ago. The people who died on these floating prisons were taken to the island and buried in shallow graves. But because of rising sea levels and constant erosion along the coastline, the bodies that were buried here have started to surface. Now there are loose pieces of coffins, random skeletons, and barnacle-ravaged bones littering the entire island. As of right now, visitors are banned from visiting the island. It's a protected wetland and important breeding site for birds. This is actually the reason why it's forbidden to go there, not because of the human bones. This site was deemed critical for the breeding and nesting of birds even before the bones began to appear. Number 9. Ross Island. Ross Island was once the site where convicts and political prisoners lived alongside wealthy British colonials. Today it stands eerie and abandoned. The gruesome past of Ross Island can still be found to this day, shrouded in overgrown foliage and the knots of ficus trees. But what happened to this small island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean? After the Indian Mutiny of 1857, the British set up a penal colony to detain political prisoners. This was the beginning of Ross Island. It's the smallest of the 576 islands that form the Andaman and Nicobar archipelago. It was in such a place that the British colonists would be safe from attack and their Indian prisoners would have no chance of escape. The inmates were forced to build the island themselves, overseeing the construction of their own prisons as well as the luxurious habitations that the British officers called home. Then, convicts were sent to the island in hordes, most of them sick with disease. It was a pretty disgusting time. The island eventually shut down in 1937 after what some consider was the darkest chapter in the history of the British Empire. But there were still people left on the island. At least there were until 1941 when a magnitude 8.1 earthquake occurred and killed over 3,000 people. And just 1 year later, the Japanese began heading in that direction, the British ran away, the island was pillaged of its material, and it hasn't really been occupied since. Today it's administered by the Indian government and largely reclaimed by nature, though there are still hidden secrets if you have the stomach to poke around in the dirt. Number 8. Ramree Island. Ramree Island, located off the coast of Myanmar, is considered the most dangerous island in the world. It also hides a terrifying secret. It played a rather disturbing role in World War II with a handful of battles taking place on its shores. But 1945 was the most infamous year for the island. British soldiers were driving the Japanese back into the swampy mangrove forest away from the main part of the island. But what nobody knew at the time was that the mangrove forest was literally bursting with saltwater crocodiles. These crocodiles were completely impartial to the war. They didn't care who they ate. The crocodiles of Ramree Island can grow to be over 2,200 pounds, 998 kilograms, with lengths of up to 23 feet, 7 meters. According to National Geographic, saltwater crocodiles are the animals most likely to feast on a human, and that's exactly what they did to the Japanese soldiers. 1,000 soldiers fled into the mangrove forest. Only 500 of them escaped with their lives. Even the Guinness World Record has this marked down as the greatest number of fatalities in a single crocodile attack. Today, this is a forbidden zone. You are absolutely not allowed to go wandering into the deadly mangrove forest. And if you are hoping to find some fascinating World War II relics left behind by the deceased soldiers, good luck. You'd have to fight 24 crocodiles just to get them. What would you do if you had to get access to this croc-infested territory? Let me know in the comments down below, and be sure to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. Number 7. Isola La Gaiola. Isola La Gaiola is a small, picturesque island with a dark and disturbing past. The island's located in the waters off the Gulf of Naples. The waters are emerald and clear, and depending on where you look, you may see submerged ruins hidden below the surface. There is a private villa on the island that to this day remains unoccupied. And believe it or not, the local Italians refuse to go anywhere near it as they fear the island is cursed. Talk of a curse didn't begin until the 1800s when a mysterious hermit known as Il Mago began living on the island. He was isolated from the community, squatting in a ramshackle hut until one day he just vanished and was never seen again. The next resident of Isola La Gaiola is the one who built the spacious villa that still dominates the island today. After he built it, he suffered financial ruin and his life turned to garbage. In 1911, a captain piloting a ship near the island, who had allegedly been thinking about buying it, crashed and drowned. Basically, misfortune has plagued those interested in the island up until the 1970s. Now the island is a protected marine area owned by the region. It's possible to visit, but you'd have to swim there from the shore, and considering how cursed this place is, you might never make it. Number 6. Vulcan Point Island. Vulcan Point is an island in the middle of a lake, with the lake being in the middle of a volcano, the volcano being in the middle of a slightly larger lake, which itself is in the center of a bigger island, and all of it inside of an archipelago found in the Pacific Ocean. Vulcan Point is in Lake Taal, the Philippines. It's a highly active volcano that has claimed thousands of innocent lives ever since it began erupting in 1977. It's considered the most active volcano in the region. But despite the danger, Vulcan Point is a hot destination for tourists, who enjoy hiking up the hill either on foot or on horseback. But here's how the island stacks up. At the very top of the Taal volcano, there's a caldera 1,000 feet, 305 meters above sea level. A caldera is basically the crater-shaped mouth of a volcano. This particular one is filled with water and considered to be the largest crater lake on the planet. Then in the center of this crater lake is a small island called Vulcan Point, which is actually a very small cone of the volcano. This place erupted most recently in January of 2020, killing 39 people and causing the lake to dry up. There are no longer tours being offered in the area as it's become yet another dangerous and forbidden island. Number 5. Gruinard Island. Gruinard Island in Scotland has been contaminated for 50 years. It is one of the most secretive islands anywhere in the United Kingdom. Back in 1942, the British were developing an anthrax weapon to be used during World War II that would devastate the Germans. They were testing an extremely deadly strain of anthrax known as Volum 14578. Bombs were filled with anthrax. They would then detonate in a cloud of toxic dust, which would drift down to kill anyone it came into contact with. But of course, the British couldn't really test the bomb on people. They instead tested the bomb on Gruinard Island, using sheep instead of humans. The army learned through their testing that they had the power to contaminate a German city so effectively that it could never be occupied again, or at least not for a few decades. Even all these years after the tests, Gruinard Island is uninhabitable and off-limits. The most recent case of anthrax on the island was in 2007 when a sheep got infected. The secrets on this island are better left hidden. Number 4. Palmyra Atoll. Palmyra Atoll is a place of intrigue and mystery. The island here was first visited by the Spanish privateer the Esperanza in 1816. The crew of the Esperanza had stolen the treasure during their occupation of Peru and loaded it onto their boat. There were at least 1.5 million Spanish gold coins along with a small hoard of Inca relics. But on their way back to Spain, the ship was attacked and boarded by pirates who stole the treasure. It was the pirates who then crashed the vessel on Palmyra Atoll and were forced to bury the majority of the treasure on the island. But there's more going on here than just lots of riches. There have been countless reports of people vanishing, of entire ships disappearing without a trace, and other spooky things going on in connection to the island. Nobody knows if it truly is haunted, but it seems like anyone unfortunate enough to spend any significant amount of time near the island ends up either very unlucky or very dead. And to date, nobody has managed to find that hidden treasure. Number 3. Poveglia Island. Poveglia Island is in a small lagoon near Venice. For centuries, it's been a horrifying place and a dumping ground for those with disease. In 1421, Poveglia was used by people hiding from the barbaric invaders who were too lazy to go search the nearby islands. The escapees built a small community and lived on the island away from the mainland with their own laws and rules until around the 14th century, when the population dwindled and the island was abandoned. It was in 1348 that the bubonic plague arrived in nearby Venice. Poveglia became an island quarantine colony. The plague killed 1 out of every 3 people in Italy. As you can imagine, the bodies stacked up quite quickly. Later on, Napoleon used the island to store gunpowder. In the 1800s, the island was used as an insane asylum full of crazy people. Then the island was used as a geriatric center until 1975. Today, the abandoned island is completely off-limits. But what's the hidden secret on the island, you ask? How about the remains of plague victims, a little bit of plague in the soil, and an alleged accumulation of dark forces powerful enough to scare any unwanted visitors right away? Number 2. North Sentinel Island. North Sentinel Island is without a doubt the most forbidden island in the world. We all learned about this strange, secluded place when the 26-year-old American blogger named John Allen Chau was killed by the island's inhabitants. John was an evangelical missionary. He wanted to convert the most isolated tribe in the world to Christianity. As a result, they shot him with an arrow. A lot happened in the aftermath. According to The Guardian, John's father blamed the American missionary community, saying that his son died from extreme Christianity. But what else happened is that the world had their sights on the indigenous group known as the Sentinelese, though we only named them this because they live on North Sentinel Island. To this day, nobody actually knows what the islanders call themselves. Where is this island? It's in the Andaman Island chain, about as far away from civilization as possible. These people are so secluded that they shoot arrows at planes when they fly by. There's somewhere between 80 and 150 people living on the island, but this is just an estimate. It could be as many as 500 or as few as 10. The people have been living there for God only knows how long. They live a very easy lifestyle and paddle around in their canoes harvesting crabs and fish. They really have a lifestyle that most had over 3,000 years ago. It's not clear what's going to be done with the Sentinelese. For now, it looks like the world is leaving them alone to their own devices. But sooner or later, the isolated tribe will probably be forced to join the rest of the world. Maybe they'll become their own community. What do you think? Number 1. Seaview Hospital. Seaview Hospital is one of those places you think would be fun to visit until you actually get there. This terrifying abandoned children's hospital was once the largest tuberculosis sanitarium in the US. It's full of used medical equipment, horrible memories, and the lingering ghosts of sick people. The hospital is on Staten Island and once included 37 buildings developed between 1904 and 1938. Nobody is supposed to go to this place. It's been shut down and forbidden since 1961, not only because of its disturbing past, but also because it's dangerous to prowl through the remnants of the hospital alone. There are even tunnels going underneath the hospital, probably leading down into hell. While this is definitely a hot spot with urban explorers, you're not allowed to go onto the property. And why would you want to? There were thousands of TB patients housed there. If you're lucky, you'll hear the screams of suffering children echoing through the halls at night. If you're unlucky, you'll see them. Number 10. The Flatwoods Monster. An encounter back on September 12, 1952 left a powerful stain on the small town of Flatwoods, West Virginia that would never leave. The Flatwoods Monster was first sighted by a group of young boys, their dog, and one of their mothers. The sighting of the beast made national news headlines and even prompted a UFO inquiry by the US Air Force. Today, the small tourist shops in Flatwoods are still peddling t-shirts and other memorabilia of the Flatwoods Monster. But just what exactly happened on September 12, 1952? It was dusk and a pair of brothers had just finished playing in the schoolyard. They noticed a pulse of red light streaking across the sky, which seemed to touch down at a nearby farm. When the boys arrived at the farm to investigate, bringing along a local mother with them, everyone witnessed a giant monster at least 10 feet, 3 meters tall. The monster had a body completely blood red, a green and glowing face, and even claws for hands. It was a true freak, and those who saw it ran away screaming. Of course, details about the monster soon became exaggerated. Reports started coming in that the beast was actually 17 feet, 5 meters tall. And even though no spotting was ever made again, the Flatwoods Monster lives on in West Virginia legend. Number 9. The Mogollon Monster. Arizona is home to something known as the Mogollon Monster, another mythical creature that lives around the Grand Canyon. The monster is often spotted on the hiking trails near sundown when the leaves are rustling and there's an eerie stillness in the air. It's sometimes spotted on the windy roads that lead through the canyon's campgrounds. The Mogollon Monster is a hairy, ape-like beast that stalks the landscape and sometimes unleashes bloody screams that terrify humans. The beast was spotted as early as 1903, with the first report being published by Williams News. The first eyewitness, a man named Mr. Stevens, claimed that he saw a man-creature with long white hair, a beard that reached all the way to his knees, fingers like a talon, and his whole body coated in coarse gray hair. The creature also apparently had burnt flesh around its face and bright green eyes. Stevens claimed that he was charged by the monster, who was at the time brandishing a large club. But he fired his rifle and the monster ran away scared. There were other sightings of the monster, including a Boy Scouts camping trip that witnessed something similar in 1944 near Payson. Nobody knows what the monster is, but considering there have been sightings as recently as 2014, it's highly likely that some kind of monster is wandering around northern Arizona. What it wants is another story altogether. Number 8. Fouke Monster. The Fouke Monster was spotted in June of 1971 when a farmer found 3-toed tracks at the edge of his soybean field. The tracks were far too large to belong to any ordinary animal, and the farmer wasn't the only one who found clues of the monster's existence. A deer hunter reportedly saw the creature in the woods. One man even moved his family to another town after he had a horrifying encounter with the monster that left him traumatized. Even a carload of residents from Texarkana witnessed the beast running across the highway on a late spring evening. There have been a few different descriptions of the monster. Some claimed it looked like a howling ape, some claimed it had glowing red eyes, and others still said it looked more like a swamp man. Unfortunately, the Fouke Monster was never captured or photographed. After 1971, it was never seen again. The mayor of Fouke, Arkansas, has since claimed that the monster was probably never real, but simply hype. He thinks it was all imagined, but that hasn't stopped the Fouke Monster from growing in popularity. The original farmer who spotted the tracks at the edge of their soybean field made a plaster cast of the footprints and sold about 5,000 of them. There was even a low-budget movie starring the residents of Fouke titled The Legend of Boggy Creek, which made a handsome little profit. To this day, nobody knows if it really existed. Number 7. The Slide Rock Bolter. The Slide Rock Bolter is a mysterious creature witnessed by North American lumberjacks in the early 19th century. The monster supposedly lives in the Colorado mountains, but only in places where the mountain has a slope of more than 45 degrees. The beast allegedly has a giant head, small eyes, a huge mouth, and a tail that ends in a fluke kind of like a dolphin's. The monster supposedly waits throughout the entire day for tourists or helpless creatures to get near enough that it can open its mouth and swallow unsuspecting people whole. Some reports claim that entire parts of tourists have been gulped up in a single bite by the Slide Rock Bolter. Its body is so massive that it can crush trees. Believe it or not, the Slide Rock Bolter has caused quite a fuss in Colorado. It spends its days watching gulches for tourists with its beady little eyes. The bolter then speeds down the slope like a toboggan and scoops up its victims before hurrying up the next slope. Nobody's ever gotten a picture of the bolter, nor has it ever been witnessed in the 21st century. But back in the 19th century, it was a fearsome monster that really did scare lumberjacks working in the region. It probably came into being as an old wives' tale during the mining boom in the 1880s. Number 6. The Kirtland Melonheads. On a dark and stormy night in the 1970s, unbelievable creatures were spotted in the woods of Ohio. These creatures had abnormally large heads with no hair, and legend has it that they still roam Ohio today. These monsters are known as the Kirtland Melonheads, and some believe they're quite dangerous. There are 2 local legends of just how the creatures with giant heads came to be alive. The most popular theory is that a man named Dr. Crow was a mad scientist doing procedures on orphans. During these procedures, the orphans developed brain swelling and grotesque deformities to their heads. The children then burned down the doctor's house, killing him and his wife. Since the disfigured teens had no place to go, they took to the forest and survived on the land, scaring the occasional tourist or local who was unfortunate enough to spot them. There's of course another legend which says it was actually the government responsible for experimenting on the children and giving them extra large heads before they escaped to the wilderness surrounding Kirtland. Mean locals came up with the name Melonheads because of the children's swollen skulls. They were almost exclusively witnessed in the night. Throughout the years, the sightings have changed as the children have grown into adults. Many people still believe there's a small group of people with giant heads living in the Ohio woods. What would you do if you saw misshapen people like the Kirtland Melonheads wandering in the woods? Would you try to talk to them, or would you run away screaming? Let me know in the comments down below. Then remember to subscribe to American Eye if you haven't already for more amazing videos like this one. Number 5. Florida's Skunk Ape. It was 1974 when Dave Shealy first witnessed Florida's skunk ape. He was only 10 years old at the time, and this was several years after Dave's father had discovered a pair of footprints left behind by Florida's very own version of Bigfoot. The skunk ape was so named because of its gross, skunky odor. It's like Bigfoot, except stinky, which of course you'd expect from Florida. Dave was deer hunting with his older brother in the swamp behind their house, what is today Big Cypress National Preserve, when he came face to face with the ape. According to Dave himself, his brother spotted it first, and he couldn't get a clear look at it because it wasn't quite tall enough. Dave's brother had to pick him up, at which point Dave spotted the beast about 100 yards, 90 meters away. They had heard about the skunk ape before, but had never imagined seeing it in person. It looked like a man but was totally covered in fuzzy white hair. Dave and his brother then ran away horrified and traumatized for the rest of their lives. Dave is now 50 years old and relentlessly pursues the skunk ape through the swamps of Florida. He's written a field guide about the ape, he makes TV appearances, and he even established the Skunk Ape Research Headquarters on his own property. This is where he teaches tourists all about the legendary southern Bigfoot and its stinky white fur. Unfortunately, the skunk ape is about as believable as the Sasquatch, and all the videos taken of the creature are fuzzy and shot from far away, making every sighting less than reliable. Number 4. The Menehune of Hawaii. The Menehune are an ancient race of small people who allegedly lived in Hawaii before settlers ever arrived on the island. These are perhaps the most believable mythological creatures anywhere on the United States soil. Some scholars say that the ruins of the Menehune's culture have been destroyed and covered up, while other scholars say they never existed at all. But there's no denying that the mythology of the Menehune has captivated the minds of locals for hundreds of years. These tiny humans were basically hobbits, and they occupied Hawaii before the original Polynesians arrived. They built roads, temples, and all kinds of other cool stuff, like statues and dams. Some experts, such as Catherine Luomala, claim that the Menehune were actually original settlers of the island and the direct descendants of the Marquesas Islanders who occupied Hawaii way back in 350 AD. The Tahitians conquered the island in 1100, then referring to the defeated islanders as Menehune, which translates to people of low social status. In any case, the legend has morphed over the years, and the Menehune today are seen as mythological hobbits who once lived in Hawaii. Some claim they've even witnessed curious primitive creatures skulking in the remote regions of Hawaii's forests. The only thing that really puts a damper on the legend is that no skeletal remains of miniature humans have ever been found in Hawaii. Number 3. The Beast of Bray Road. The Beast of Bray Road is the most terrifying American monster you've probably never heard of. Sightings of this freakish creature have been happening near Elkhorn, Wisconsin and all the way to Illinois. The Beast of Bray Road is said to resemble Bigfoot, only more terrifying. It stands upright on 2 legs and if you're not paying close enough attention, can easily be mistaken for a bear or even a huge wolf. But just what exactly is the Beast of Bray Road? Depending on who you ask, it's many things. Some locals claim the beast is a very real werewolf, while others think it's more of Wisconsin's own Sasquatch. But that brings us to the sightings. A reporter from the area named Linda Godfrey first covered the story of the Beast of Bray Road. Linda was so convinced by what the eyewitnesses told her that she wrote an actual book about it. And according to the eyewitnesses, the beast most closely resembles a werewolf. Several people reported seeing it in their yards and their driveways. They always said the same thing: it looked like a giant bloodthirsty wolf. Of course, the skeptics would have you believe the Beast of Bray Road is nothing but a wild dog that caused mass hysteria. But this is unlikely considering most people can tell the difference between a dog and a 7-foot werewolf. No physical evidence has ever been uncovered, and nobody's managed to get a convincing video of the beast, but enough people have seen something resembling a 2-legged man-wolf prowling around Bray Road for there to be some truth in the story. Number 2. The Van Meter Monster. In 1903, some kind of winged monster descended on the small town of Van Meter, Iowa. Of course, angry locals attacked it with shotguns. It all happened in this rural town when prominent members of Van Meter witnessed something half man and half animal with huge wings like a bat creeping around their town. It moved at incredible speeds and shot blinding light from a giant horn that protruded through its head. Each time locals saw it, shotguns were fired. But no matter how many times they blasted it with their guns, the creature wouldn't die. The creature was seen perched on top of telephone poles, and some claimed it hopped like a kangaroo, and others suspected it was a type of dinosaur. But here's where things get really weird. The monster was last sighted with a smaller version of itself descending into the shaft of an old mine nearby the town. The locals waited outside the shaft of the mine for it to come out, but it never did. To this day, nobody knows if the Van Meter monster was truly some kind of prehistoric beast that awoke from its slumber and then crawled back into the depths of the earth, or if it was all just a big exaggeration by bored townsfolk. Number 1. Sinkhole Sam. Albert Neufeld came across what would come to be known as Sinkhole Sam roughly 70 years ago. Albert was a young Mennonite boy living in rural Kansas when he found an enormous snake-like monster swimming in Big Sinkhole, just a few miles outside of the town of Inman. This creature has been described as anywhere from 15 to 30 feet, 4.5 to 9 meters long. Apparently, everyone agrees it looks kind of like a giant worm, and nobody knows what it really is. Some people claim that Sinkhole Sam is some kind of plankton-eating lake monster. Some have compared Sam to the Loch Ness Monster. But to be honest, nobody's gotten a good look at it, and there haven't been any reliable sightings since the 1960s. Some say what the young boy probably saw was a gopher snake, which can appear larger than it really is when swimming. The legend sticks to this day, but Sinkhole Sam seems to have vanished in modern times. Number 10. The Circleville Letters. In 1976, someone initiated a campaign of terror that would haunt the entire town of Circleville. The event came to be known as the Circleville Letters, and it remains unsolved to this very day. It all started with the letters. Someone began sending letters to the residents of the town that contained threats of violence. The letters also contained personal information that only the recipient of the letters could possibly have been aware of. The letters sometimes contained lewd artwork. None of them had a return address. Some of them were even delivered from very far away. The one thing all the letters had in common was that they were written in the same style. They were written in block letters clearly meant to hide the author's real handwriting. There was one woman who was particularly singled out more than the other residents. Her name was Mary Gillespie, and she was a school bus driver. She received quite a few letters, with one of them even alleging that she was having an affair with the superintendent at the local school. Then a letter ended up being sent to her husband with threats saying his wife needed to end the affair or he would die. Mary was adamant that she was not having an affair. After 2 weeks, more letters arrived threatening to broadcast Mary's alleged affair to the entire town. Then Mary's husband received a phone call. He was so angered by whatever the caller said that he left the house with his pistol. He ended up crashing into a tree and dying. When police investigated, they found that Ron had fired his pistol once sometime before the crash, but they never found out why. They also never found out who had been writing the Circleville letters. Number 9. Susie Lamplugh. 25-year-old Susie Lamplugh got a job in London in 1986 as a real estate agent. The agency put her at a desk in the window, saying that the most attractive woman also got put on display to lure male customers into the shop. On July 28th, Susie went out for a lunch appointment with someone named Mr. Kipper. She never returned to work, and 35 years later, she has yet to be found. It turned into one of Britain's largest missing persons investigations. To this day, nobody has any idea what happened to Susie. But this is one of those weird missing persons cases where investigators never even received a clue. The case got a lot of attention from the media, seeing as Susie was the idealistic middle-class woman who fell victim to a mysterious crime in broad daylight. But regardless of the media frenzy, there was no headway made by the police. 5 years after the incident, not a single trace of Susie had been found. Her body was never discovered, police could never trace her whereabouts after leaving her office, and in 1993, Susie was presumed murdered and legally declared dead. Number 8. The Oakville Blobs. In August of 1994, residents in Oakville got the surprise of a lifetime when translucent blobs, each of them about the size of a grain of rice, began raining from the sky. The first incident occurred at someone's home, where the blobs rained down during the night and allegedly made the owners of the house develop symptoms like the flu. Over the next 3 weeks, 5 additional reports came in from locals discovering gelatinous blobs raining from the sky around their home before quickly falling ill after coming into contact with them. Then it stopped. As quickly as the blobs came, they were gone. A microbiologist from Washington State Department of Health went to investigate. He discovered that the blobs contained 2 distinct species of bacteria, though the bacteria should not have been harmful to humans. To this day, nobody has any idea what the blobs were or why they fell from the sky. There have also been claims that the microbiologist sent by the government was actually a fraud, simply there to collect evidence and debunk any theories. Speaking of theories, there are a lot of them. Some claim the blobs were the result of military weapons testing. Some say they were pieces of jellyfish that got splashed into the stratosphere during a bomb test in the Pacific Ocean. Other theories say the blobs never even fell from the sky, but instead appeared on the ground overnight. In any case, nothing like this has ever happened again. Number 7. The Setagaya family murder. The Setagaya family murder is one of the grisliest cold cases in Japanese history. In 2020, the cold case turned 20 years old. But what happened back in December of 2000? Well, the Miyazaki family was murdered. But there was some stuff that happened before the murders. The Miyazaki family moved to an up-and-coming neighborhood in 1991. But the Tokyo government had plans for the area, and so by the year 2000, they had purchased most of the houses and kicked most of the people out. In 2000, there were only 4 houses still standing. The Miyazaki family occupied one of those houses and were planning on leaving soon. On the night of December 30th, somebody entered the house through a window on the second-floor balcony. This person strangled the youngest Miyazaki to death. Next was the father, who was stabbed through his thighs and buttocks, his arms and chest, and his face. The final victims were the mother and daughter, who had been sleeping together in the attic. The killer climbed up the foldable ladder, went into the attic, and stabbed both girls to death. The killer then went into their kitchen and ate ice cream that they found in their freezer right out of the bucket. They even had a Band-Aid and used it to patch a wound on their hand. Most shocking of all is that the killer sat down and browsed the web for a bit before leaving. In the end, nobody could figure out who killed the Miyazaki family or why. To this very day, the killer is likely walking free throughout the streets of Japan. Number 6. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse. The Flannan Isles is a small group of 7 islets off the coast of Scotland. In December of 1900, the ship Hesperus set sail for the Isle of Eilean More. The duty of the ship was to relieve the lighthouse keeper as part of the normal rotation. Bad weather had delayed the journey by several days, but it wasn't a big deal. They finally got to the island, but were surprised that nobody was there at the dock waiting for them. Even stranger was when they explored the island and found all 3 of the lighthouse keepers had vanished. But they had nowhere to go. This is why it's so insane that they vanished. It would make sense if one of them fell off the cliffs and drowned. But it didn't make sense that all 3 of them disappeared. Even stranger is that when the replacement lighthouse keepers investigated, they discovered that the kitchen table still had plates of meat and potatoes ready to be eaten. The clocks had stopped, a chair was overturned, 2 of the coats were gone, and the gate door was shut. This was obviously perplexing. The clues would suggest that the 3 men had stopped to eat, something had created a panic, 2 of the men ran outside, and a 3rd was left inside, presumably to guard the lighthouse as were the rules. The lighthouse was never allowed to be empty. In the end, we simply don't know what happened to the Flannan Isles lighthouse keepers. They just vanished. Number 5. Lars Mittank. In July of 2014, Lars Mittank vanished in a field just outside the international airport in Varna, Bulgaria. Lars was from Berlin. He went to join his friends on holiday in Bulgaria before he went missing. One of the strangest aspects of the case is that an airport security video captured his last known sighting and was uploaded to the internet, earning Lars the title of the most famous missing person on YouTube. But here's where the truly strange details of his vanishing come into play. He was literally in the airport and about to go home when he seemingly changed his mind. He was heard saying, "I don't want to die here," right before he dropped his belongings, ran out of the airport, climbed over a fence, disappeared into the forest, and then was never seen again. Lars has now been missing for 7 years. His family has begged for information from the public and have pleaded with authorities to find their son, but Lars is still missing. Number 4. The Zimbabwe Alien Invasion. In 1994, a school in the small town of Rua in Zimbabwe experienced an alien invasion. 62 students reported seeing an unidentified flying object before a strange being communicated with them. These children were between the ages of 8 and 12. They were visited by the strange being during the morning break. They were playing in the schoolyard, and a silver craft came out of nowhere, dropped down into the bush behind the school, and a creature came out of the alien craft and wandered over to where the children were watching. The creature was apparently dressed all in black and had big eyes like rugby balls. According to the kids, the alien warned them that they needed to take care of the planet. That was the message. It wasn't about anything political and not about something going on out in the universe. The alien literally just said that the children needed to take better care of the planet. Scared, most of them ran screaming back to their teachers. By the time the teachers took any kind of interest, the alien was gone. After the incident, the children were asked to draw pictures of what they had seen independently. Each child drew a picture by themselves with no suggestions from friends. Shockingly, they all drew very similar pictures. Harvard professor of psychiatry John E. Mack visited the school in 1994 and filmed his interviews with the kids. It became clear at that point that the children were telling the truth. They had indeed been visited by an alien. It's important to note that after the Harvard professor began investigating this incident, he was put under extreme scrutiny by the school, ignored by his colleagues, and essentially discredited as a hack. Number 3. The Sodder Children. The Sodder children went missing on Christmas Eve in 1945, and nobody knows where they went. For nearly 40 years, a billboard stood beside Route 16 near Fayetteville in West Virginia with the faces of the 5 children who had gone missing on it, demanding justice and answers. But what exactly happened to these children? The night before Christmas, George and Jenny Sodder and 9 of their 10 children went to bed. One of their oldest sons was currently away in the Army. Just after midnight, a fire broke out and George and Jenny escaped with 4 of their kids. The other 5 were never seen from again. George had tried to save them. He broke a window and tried to get back in the house, but it just wasn't possible. The house was already burning and it was filled with smoke. Even stranger is that the phone seemed to not be working. Everyone nearby was trying to phone the fire department, but all the lines were dead. Even though the fire department was only a bit more than 2 miles, 3.2 kilometers away, they didn't receive the 911 call for around 7 hours. By then, the house was ash. But the real mystery came when the remains of the 5 children weren't found. Not a single bone, piece of hair, or tooth was ever discovered in the wreckage of the house. Popular theories are that the children actually lived and were abducted by someone who never wanted them to be found. But nobody knows who would have done that or why. Number 2. Lauren Spearer. Lauren Spearer was an Indiana University student who went missing in June of 2011 and has been declared one of the most mysterious unsolved disappearances in history. She was 20 years old and spent the early hours of the morning partying at a downtown bar. The last time she was seen, Lauren was walking near an off-campus apartment just as the sun was coming up. She was last witnessed walking barefoot at 4:30 a.m. at the intersection of 11th Street and College Avenue. Lauren Spearer has not been seen since that fateful morning. Police scoured the area. They searched high and low. Nobody has found a trace of her, and it's believed that Lauren is already dead. One of the prevailing theories is that based on Laurel's level of intoxication at the time, she'd been drugged by somebody at the bar who had plotted to kidnap her. If this really was the case, the kidnapper has certainly gotten away with it. It's been 10 years and there's still no sign of Lauren. Number 1. Road trip gone wrong. The Trump family went on a road trip completely technology-free. They wanted to take a break from tech, something more and more people are doing these days. But their road trip ended with a police investigation and 2 of the family members stuck in psychiatric care. Let's start at the beginning. The Trump family were completely ordinary people living in a nice property on the outskirts of Melbourne. Mark and Jacoba went on an impromptu road trip on August 29th, packing their 3 kids in the car and leaving. They left their passports at home, their mobile phones, and even their credit cards. It was an off-the-grid road trip. It later turned out that they were actually running from a danger that may have been imaginary. The Trump's son Mitchell was the first to leave. He abandoned the family on the second day. Later on that same day, the 2 daughters, Rihanna and Ella, also ran away. They stole a car and fled to a nearby town where they reported their parents missing. Rihanna and Ella got separated, with Ella going home where she ran into the police. Mitchell arrived home the next morning. Rihanna was found the next day in a psychotic state, rambling that she didn't know her name. She was taken to the hospital and is still in psychiatric care. Jacoba Tromp was found shortly after, also psychotic, and she was sent to join her daughter in the psychiatric ward. It would be 6 days after the road trip started that Mark was found. He was questioned, but the police couldn't do anything to him because he had committed no crimes and he was left alone. But it was still a very strange road trip, with no reason ever being given for why the two females went abruptly insane. Thanks for watching. Do you have any theories about these mysterious cases? If so, sound off in the comments down below, and be sure to hit the subscribe button for more videos like these right here on American Eye.